Imagine accepting a routine pizza delivery and ending up in a place so disturbing that even the police couldn't explain what happened there. I wish I was making this story up. I was working a late-night pizza delivery shift when I got the strangest order of my life. The address was nearly 20 minutes away, deep in the countryside. Out where I lived, that wasn't unusual. What caught my attention was the order itself: 4 large pizzas. I figured it had to be a party, and I was already imagining a decent tip. The drive took me down a maze of dirt roads surrounded by endless woods. Eventually, my GPS announced that I had arrived. I stared through my windshield. The building looked abandoned. It sat alone in a clearing, surrounded by trees on all sides. No cars, no lights, no signs of life. I immediately called my manager and asked him to verify the address. He read it back to me 3 times. It was correct. "Just knock on the door." Reluctantly, I grabbed the pizzas and walked toward the building. The silence out there felt wrong. No insects, no wind, nothing. There wasn't a doorbell, so I pounded on the door. No response. I knocked again. Still nothing. Annoyed, I turned to leave, but then I heard something. A rustling sound. It came from inside the building. I froze. "Pizza delivery!" I shouted. The noise stopped instantly. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then I noticed movement in one of the windows. Someone was staring at me. At first, all I could make out were their eyes. Wide, far too wide. The kind of wide that didn't seem human. They weren't blinking, they were just staring. I felt my stomach drop. Without thinking, I dropped the pizzas and sprinted back to my car. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and turned the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing. The third time, the engine finally roared to life. I slammed my foot on the gas and sped away, but almost immediately, the car started shaking violently. A loud scraping noise echoed from underneath. Then, the vehicle lurched to a stop. My heart pounded as I stepped outside to investigate. The beam from my phone's flashlight revealed something horrifying. All 4 tires had been slashed, not one. All 4. Someone had done it while I was standing at the front door, which meant they had been outside with me the entire time. Close enough to touch me. I locked myself back inside the car and called 911. The operator told me officers were on their way and instructed me not to leave the vehicle. So I waited, alone, surrounded by darkness. Every tree outside looked like a figure standing perfectly still. Every shadow felt alive. Then, something happened that still gives me nightmares. I was checking the windows, making sure nobody was nearby, and then I glanced at the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting in the back seat. I nearly screamed. It was the same person from the window, a woman. Her eyes were impossibly wide. The corners of her mouth stretched upward into a grin that looked painful, like her face wasn't built to smile that much. And somehow, she hadn't made a sound. I threw open the door and ran. I didn't care where, I just ran. Branches tore at my skin. Roots tripped me. I crashed through the forest in complete darkness until my lungs burned. Finally, I collapsed behind a fallen tree and hid. Minutes passed. Then an hour, then maybe more. I don't know. At some point, distant sirens echoed through the woods. I forced myself to stand and followed the sound. When I reached the road, I saw police lights flashing around my car. I stumbled toward them, screaming for help. The officers searched the abandoned building. Inside, they found almost nothing. No furniture, no electricity, no signs that anyone had lived there for years. The only things they recovered were several homemade tire spikes, the kind used to puncture vehicles. The police believed At least two people were involved. The woman I saw and someone else. Someone who slashed my tires. Someone who had to be standing outside while I was knocking. Someone who was never seen. The case went cold. Nobody was ever arrested. But that's not the part that haunts me. A few weeks later, one of the officers contacted me. He told me something they hadn't revealed publicly. When they examined my car, they found muddy handprints on the roof. Not fingerprints. Handprints. Dozens of them. As if multiple people had been crawling across the top of my car while I was sitting inside talking to 911, listening, waiting. And according to the officer, the mud they found wasn't from the forest. It came from a dried-up cemetery nearly 10 miles away. I quit that job the next morning, but sometimes late at night I wake up for no reason and look toward my bedroom window. And every time I do, for a split second, I swear I can see a pair of impossibly wide eyes staring back at me. It was my last week working at an Italian restaurant. It was half pizzeria, half sit-down restaurant, so my responsibilities changed from shift to shift. Some days I'd be working the register, other days I'd be bussing tables, and occasionally I'd be out making deliveries. Deliveries were always my favorite because of the tips. That's why it's ironic that I ended up leaving that job with the most terrifying experience of my life while doing a delivery. It was late at night, the kind of shift where weird things tend to happen. An order came in for 3 specialty pizzas. It was a fairly large order, around $70 worth of food. The address was on the rough side of town, which immediately made me a little uneasy. Still, I figured it would be fine. I drove an old beat-up Civic that barely looked worth stealing anyway. The drive took about 15 minutes. When I arrived, I grabbed the pizzas and walked up to the front door. I rang the bell. The door opened almost immediately. A Latino man stood there. At first, he only opened the door halfway and glanced at the pizzas. Then, he pulled it open the rest of the way. That's when I saw the pistol in his hand. Everything inside me dropped. I'm not a gun expert, but if I had to guess, it looked like a Colt .45. Not that it mattered. The second I saw that gun, my mind went completely blank. Before I could react, 2 more men appeared behind him and rushed to the doorway. They grabbed me by the arms while the first guy kept the gun pointed directly at me. The 3 of them started shouting in Spanish. I couldn't understand most of what they were saying, but I knew enough to realize I was in serious trouble. Then, the man with the gun looked at me and said in broken English, "Give me all your stuff." I could barely breathe. I handed him my wallet. Then he yelled, "Phone." I immediately gave him that too. It was a Motorola Razr, which was basically the iPhone of its time. One of the men grabbed my wrist and ripped my watch off so hard it nearly took my hand with it. Thankfully, it wasn't worth much. Then things got even worse. One of them pulled my ID out of my wallet. He stared at it for a moment. Then he read my address out loud. I felt every bit of color drain from my face. The man holding the gun pointed at me and told me that if I went to the police, they'd come to my house and kill my family. I remember nodding and saying, "Okay, I understand." In reality, I was trying not to completely break down. A second later, they shoved me out of the doorway. I tumbled down the concrete steps and landed hard on my hands and knees. I could feel blood running down my legs. The door slammed shut. Just like that, they were gone. All I had left were my car keys. I never went back to the restaurant that night. I was too shaken, too scared. When I got home, my parents immediately knew something was wrong. I was pale, trembling, and covered in scrapes. After a while, I finally told them everything. I told them about the robbery, the gun, and most importantly, the threat. My dad had connections within the local police department. The moment he heard what happened, he called one of his closest friends. Within hours, police had identified the man living at that address. His name was Rodrigo. He already had 4 felony convictions. Ignoring the threats, officers surrounded the house and entered with their weapons drawn. I wasn't there to witness it myself, but we later heard what happened. 2 of the 3 men were still inside. Both were arrested. Rodrigo eventually received a life sentence. The second man had a previous criminal record and was sentenced to 5 years, but the third man wasn't there. As far as I know, they never found him. To this day, he's still out there somewhere. That's the part that has always bothered me. Every now and then, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and hear something outside. Footsteps near the side of the house, the backyard gate creaking open, the sound of someone moving around where nobody should be. Maybe it's just paranoia. Maybe it's my imagination. But whenever I hear those noises, I remember that third man, the one who disappeared, the one who knew where I lived. Enough years have passed that I tell myself he's probably gone. Maybe he left the country. Maybe he forgot all about me. But every once in a while, when I hear something outside my window after midnight, I can't help but wonder, what if he didn't?